Hello everyone, thank you for joining us and welcome to the first session of the Sealed Rooms webinar. My name's Shelby Hanson and I'm a product specialist at Excel Air Systems. I'm here to give you all the relevant information you need in order to turn your dream into a reality with total environmental control technology for temperature, mass dehumidification, and air quality. After going over all of this throughout the next few weeks, you'll have a greater understanding of how to plan, create, build, and operate your next generation facility. Today in part 1, we'll be covering the fundamentals of site selection, method and design, and configuration of a rollout. Before diving into those concepts, we'd initially like to give you a bit of background about Excel Air Systems, who we are, and what we do. Excel Air Systems manufactures mission-critical applications for the indoor agricultural industry. During our past 15 years of experience in the business, we've deployed over 3,500 uniquely engineered systems, which have been successfully implemented in facilities across North America. As such, we've encountered all types of operational designs for facilities, from new fabrications, retrofits, shipping containers, vertical setups, and densely utilized spaces, to extremely large buildings that require many phases of development and construction. Beyond internally designing and manufacturing our systems with industry-leading components, we also offer free consulting services and an unmatched level of customer resources and technical support. We are completely vertically integrated, allowing us to devise custom designs, put them through the process, and produce a finished product, all while remaining true to your unique vision. If there are configuration changes or modifications, we can take care of it in-house, providing insight based on what has worked well for customers in the past, while transparently informing you of any changes that have occurred. Excel Air Systems maintains a close working relationship with numerous professionals across all sectors of the industry, including facility operators, growers, consultants, engineers, contractors, and retailers. We make a big priority to empower you by providing you with the knowledge that you need to be successful, with the goal of earning that vital trust and ultimately building a mutual beneficial business relationship. As we aim to achieve this, we recognize the importance of casting a wide net across the industry, allowing us to gain comprehensive understanding of everyone's individual needs from one side of the spectrum to the other. Our motto at Excel Air Systems is taking complex things and making them simple, which we see as the very essence of innovation. After all, anybody can come up with a new idea, but without thoughtfully integrating it in a way that's going to make your life easier, its potential usefulness is severely limited. For that reason, we strive for innovation that will allow you to allocate more of your valued time to other important issues. We know that building a business can be challenging and complex, but if you get it right, it'll also be very good and profitable, especially in the cannabis industry. Therefore, we don't just supply the equipment, we also understand the fundamental concepts and logistics of what you're trying to achieve in order to help meet your goals. Regardless of what specific part of the business you are in within the industry, a relationship with Excel Air Systems is extremely beneficial, and we look forward to the opportunity to work with everyone. As the size and scope of the indoor agricultural sector have grown exponentially in recent years, we've recognized the growing need for greater resources on environmental control technology. Especially in such a closely guarded industry, what we are aiming to achieve with this webinar is comprehensively educating you on the essentials of designing a perfect sealed room. With that clearly laid out, we can now begin to go into the main points of our presentation, the first topic being site selection. What is site selection? Site selection is when you either have an existing business or want to start a cannabis operation at some point, and you have to decide if the resources currently at your disposal, including funds, people, and location, are sufficient. This determines if it makes sense to build a new facility or retrofit an existing property. Both options have advantages and disadvantages. If you are considering a brand new facility, what you have to keep in mind is that it's going to take longer to build something from scratch due to the engineering, time, and effort involved. It'll allow you to specifically configure the sizing and layout to exactly what you need, making it much more flexible, but it will require significantly more funds, potentially to be raised by investors or something of that nature. As for the retrofit, it's normally the faster of the two routes, which can actually be an issue as well. We've seen many people who have rushed into utilizing old buildings, like used factory locations, and the initial launch goes smoothly, until they start looking at some of the things that need to be either upgraded or completely replaced. When you go to build something new, building codes have to be updated to current standards. If you leave certain things in place and keep them as it isn't an issue. However, if you want to change something or create something new, everything needs to be brought up to today's standards, which can be costly and take more time. That being said, the retrofit can still be completed substantially faster and at a cheaper cost. If you go that route, you want to make the decision while assessing whether it's the right place to do what you need to do and with a good understanding of what it's going to take to bring it to where it needs to be. If you do that correctly and you are somebody who's open to the challenge, it'll be significantly faster and cheaper, and you will be able to start generating revenue sooner. With any of these projects, when considering the mechanical side and the HVAC components in particular, the earlier the better. If we start planning environmental control before we've even broken ground, we can look at the engineering and where things are being placed to determine how to install it most easily and effectively. With different levels of legalization throughout Canada and the United States, a great deal of care and attention must be paid to the laws of the municipalities in which you are residing and operating. Aside from acquiring building permits and meeting other standards, the most prominent roadblocks that we are often faced with involved appeasing those who are opposed to the relatively new, controversial industry. These include operating a certain distance away from schools or residential areas and following specific zoning requirements. On occasion, inspectors can become fixated on one particular aspect, oddly focusing way more on that than all the other work that has been done throughout the facility. In that case, you have to be prepared to jump through the hoops, make the specific changes to appease them, and control the situation. What we found helpful is using local builder or construction firm who have dealt with those municipalities and inspectors before. If you're in a commercial spot, do not use a residential builder. Use a commercial builder who's done a factory or something who understands that requirements at a highly localized level. This process can be frustrating, but it's important to not lose sight of the end goal. Yes, it's going to probably be 3 to 5 times longer than you had anticipated, but once you get through it, things become much easier. Along the same lines, being respectful of your neighbors and the general area and exercising extreme discretion is highly recommended. While you can push back on people in the community, as long as you are within the confines of the law, doing so does not make things easier and always contracts unwanted attention. Once everything has initially been passed, municipalities don't usually interfere if everything is running quietly. However, if they get complaints, this can result in more people coming through for audits and other tiresome issues. One commonly reoccurring issue pertains to facilities emitting strong cannabis odors, which is why Excel Air Systems produces our clean air filtration system to drastically reduce harsh smells so that they don't know what's in there in the first place. Showing care towards the community is crucial by not taking up additional parking spots or roaring through the area with loud trucks, and instead being quieter and more pleasant. You'll have a much easier experience establishing and operating a business. There's a persistent stigma surrounding cannabis, but it's continually improving, so conducting yourself in a way that shakes these stereotypical notions will help you dramatically. The establishment of your facility greatly depends on your license, which in turn totally depends on your location, because there are different cannabis production licenses available in different regions. Within that, most people tend to gravitate towards whatever they feel most comfortable with, or what their ultimate vision is, whether they want a large facility or a smaller, more personal business operation. If, for example, you are in a region where there are only a few dozen licenses available, it's going to be highly competitive, as you have to service a huge number of customers, which necessitates large capital upfront. There's tremendous pressure to ensure that everything is top standard. While getting the job done on time and on budget, it's a whole other level, especially because you're in a position where you could potentially become a public traded company. The value of seriously contemplating what's available in your area and following protocol cannot be underestimated. To further illustrate this, we've seen accountants who have never grown before but understood the documentation process after conducting extensive research by talking to multiple growers and gathering information. They were meticulous in establishing and licensing their operation and were selected as one of the first fully licensed government facilities in Canada. It is also important to consider the type of license in conjunction with facility security, as different licenses require varying clearance levels, depending on the size, scope, and scale of your operation. There's a substantial difference in required security when it's an individual craft type license compared with a large corporation facility. Another major aspect of site selection that, if overlooked, can cause serious setbacks is power and its availability. These operations require the usage of a tremendous amount of power, not only for lighting and HVAC components, but for the various trimming apparatuses and industrial machinery. In all likelihood, you are going to be using more power than virtually any other business around you. With that in place, the most profitable growing method has to be determined to put as much lighting into the smallest space as possible for the largest yield. From this perspective, there never seems to be enough power because you have to factor in that 20% of it is there to act as a buffer as power requirements. So for example, with 1,000 amps available, you can really only go up to 800 amps as an electrical safety measure. Otherwise, without that buffer, if you were operating at 100%, it could overheat. To explain further, when a single-phase 30-amp system first starts, it actually briefly peaks at about 134 amps. The grid can handle this for a split second, but any additional increase, perhaps due to a plug in the system, would cross the line with catastrophic results. This is unfortunately quite common in warmer areas where the temperature of the area around the panel increases, which hinders installation on the wiring. Therefore, whatever the size of the facility, virtually a quarter of the power has to be locked off as a precaution. Next, you have to factor in other things specifically to environmental control, like if your gear is being sized correctly. Many of our competitors purposely oversize systems up to twice the amount, installing an additional system for every one. While this will allow you to get by in an event there's a system failure, anything that's connected must have constant access to that power, as per electrical requirements. Even if you plan on never using it, the panel must be allotted for the corresponding amount of power. While the mindset of having extra systems is reasonable from an extremely cautionary point of view and redundancy is useful in a worst-case scenario, you also have to balance the drawbacks. The implication of this is not being able to have an additional 15 lights for increased productivity, while instead doubling the engineering budgeting requirements, namely price, cost, installation time, and space needed. Having double the gear does mean that each unit would be running a bit less, but the difference would still be far too negligible to make up for the fact that there are two systems going simultaneously. In fact, continually running a system at full capacity actually contributes to prolonging its lifespan. In contrast to these competitors, products and setups, Excel Air Systems offers the Evolution series, the only compact air system capable of maintaining temperature, humidity, and air quality simultaneously. With one 5-ton Evolution series unit, you can cool the heat from 15,000 watts worth of lighting. Of course, there are variables. If, for example, you're in an area with an outside temperature that routinely exceeds 85 Fahrenheit, it would begin to derate the system's capacity, which is why selecting the right gear for your area is key. Without that redundancy, by utilizing the Evolution series for a long duration, you will get the most dehumidification efficiency out of your system. In general, upon initial startup, it takes 5 to 10 minutes for the system to be operating at maximum efficiency. So it's important to keep it running, which is why sizing is so important. When it's in that zone, it's not only cooling the air more efficiently, but it's also extracting as much moisture as possible. Conversely, if you have a system that constantly is cycling on and off, it takes 15 minutes to properly achieve dehumidification. But if the system turns off within 15 minutes, it's never running at its peak state and is never going to achieve the desired temperature and humidity levels. Therefore, power availability is definitely something to consider, as often people don't realize just how much power is required, especially with so many miscellaneous variables throughout the process. This is going to lead us into our next segment, which is method and design. How does power play into our method and design? Well, the type of operational design that you are selecting, be it a large open space, a multi-rack facility, or a container, it's also going to be driven by the amount of allowable power, so these things are all interconnected. When it comes to growing cannabis, operating in vast open spaces with large floors, tall ceilings, and lights everywhere is only one method. That being said, it's certainly one of the more popular growing methods, as it requires the least amount of additional work, providing you with a lot of vertical space above to do whatever you need, like hanging units, running ducting, and setting up a lighting grid. Preferably, though, from an environmental standpoint, we don't want ceilings that are too high or too low. What would we consider too high? We definitely want to stay under 16 feet because anything taller than that results in stratification, where the air is basically layering. What would we consider too low? We don't want anything under 8 feet because then there wouldn't be sufficient room for everything. Ideally, the sweet spot for creating the optimum grow room environment is a ceiling that is around 12 feet, though there is some room for slight flexibility. With 12 feet ceilings, you still have lots of space, but not so much that the air can't properly be circulated throughout the room. In terms of environmental control, if the units are placed too high up, getting the return air back from the cold air down below to up top and vice versa becomes quite challenging. This increased level of difficulty in mixing the air and directing it to the source could lead to serious drawbacks, especially with the potential for added complications from an airborne virus, mildew, or infestation introduced into the grow room. In the event that one large room had exposure, this could lead to the entire room's worth of product needing to be destroyed. Instead, what we recommend is to break large spaces into more manageably sized room, which gives you greater control and reduces the risk for major contamination, while still providing the ultimate flexibility and versatility of multiple systems and hedging against the worst case scenario. These rooms don't have to be so small as to only have 15 lights, but they should definitely be sized to require under 100 lights. In our experience, we found that grow rooms adequately sized with 45 to 50 lights and 3 5-ton systems seem to work quite well. This more manageable setup allows you to get into a rhythm where you can take down some product each week or every other week, instead of harvest all at once. This way you can keep a small group of full-time employees on hand without needing to temporarily bring in additional labor for massive crop outs. Not only is this more efficient, it also severely reduces the security concerns that a revolving door temporary employees could raise. These smaller spaces still have sufficient redundancy, but the environmental control element is a lot tighter. Another method that has become more prevalent involves the use of multi-racking systems as a vertical growing solution, as people want to fully utilize smaller spaces due to cost and availability, especially in metropolitan areas with large populations. While this does allow you to do a lot more within a lesser area, the major drawback is that perfecting the environmental control components have never been more imperative. This is because these racks are much tighter, usually 8 feet or under, which poses challenges with regard to getting return and supply air in and out of the canopy evenly. Because heat naturally rises, if you're not engineering the room properly, each rack is going to be exponentially warmer, leading to the warmest rack at the top. We have often seen this in terms of density-related issues, whereas the light placement is already quite dense. When new layers are added, the heat density is so extreme that the temperature control becomes nearly impossible without systems as small and compact as ours. This is similar to a server room setup where intense electrical requirements leave very little room for adjustments. These vertical growing setups are where Excel air systems, ducting, and layering strategies come into play as a huge defining factor, as we have the expertise to guide our customers through each step. We've worked alongside many growers, helping them achieve their goals to great success, and we are excited to share most of that with you in part 2 of the Sealed Rooms webinar. Additional cannabis growing methods involve smaller alternative setups and use the intermodal shipping containers. It's a very tight process, and you can utilize to get into some really tight spaces. Much like with multi-rack vertical growing, these growing methods evoke their own set of problems. Containers usually only have one system in them, but are sometimes equipped with 2. When dealing with tight spaces, applying an innovative solution specifically engineered for these applications is certainly something to consider. Once you've selected a growing method, we can look at how we are going to implement that concept. It's important to note that while these decisions need not necessarily be made in specific order, they all do intertwine. For instance, your lighting selection can actually impact which growing method is best. If you were to choose LED lights, it should be with the understanding that they are intended for tighter spaces in a more compact area, as they produce about 25 to 30% less heat and need to be much closer to the plants. They're also more expensive. If your facility has a large open area with a 16-foot ceiling, you have to decide if that actually lends itself well to the setup, as your LEDs are only going to be several feet from the top of the canopy with unused, wasted airspace above. Alternatively, if you go with the HPS lights, they can be 8 feet above, as their intensity is way higher. Therefore, you really have to first decide what kind of lights you want to use, then what the power factor to each of those is. and then calculate what the throw of that lighting is based on the total heat load and maximum amperage. Once those key factors are in place, you can consider additional components such as wall fans and pumps, but as a starting point, knowing your general light load allows you to determine your minimum or maximum required number of systems. If you have the space, but don't know what kind of lighting you are going to choose, it's difficult for us to help you achieve your full potential, so that's a big factor we consider. Alongside this are room size, height, and density, which, while depending on your chosen method, can still change. Most notably, the factors affecting your facility's designs will change based on your choice of a new build or a retrofit. For example, if your facility has an unusual L-shaped room, you're going to have to adapt your setup to make it work accordingly, which not only directly relates to airflow and lighting configuration, but also aisle layout, as you have to be able to easily navigate throughout the facility. This also ties into how many rooms you are intending to set up for each function, such as mother rooms, clone rooms, veg rooms, bloom rooms, trimming rooms, and drying and curing rooms. The previously mentioned multiple room staggered yield setup makes the assembly line process like clockwork, but the more bloom rooms you have, the more mother rooms are needed to provide clones. Furthermore, each type of room requires a different method of environmental control. For example, in mother rooms, veg rooms, and clone rooms, you're going to need a high humidity environment in which these plants can thrive in their vegetative state. Although we don't want humidity too high, during night cycles, constant air temperature control is needed to ensure that they are still warmer and more humid. Depending on your system, your air conditioner might be extracting all the moisture. This is where a product like the Cloud Maker, our new upcoming mass humidifier, which will be launching by the end of the year, will prove effective in helping these plants thrive during their early stages. Then generally, when converting into larger rooms, the drastic change of going from an environment compared to that of a rainforest with high humidity to that of a desert much drier with higher heat load from the increased lighting can be quite stressful to plants, as they are not yet large enough for full transpiration to give off enough moisture. The system will suck it all out, which places them in a stressful state for a week or two. Excel Air Systems' environmental control technology allows you to temper the process by adding humidity for a smooth transition, as sort of a balancing act. When implemented correctly, this will mean happier plants and much better yields at the end of the line. As for the number of rooms themselves, this requires a lot of thought and will be dictated by the type of business you are running, the employee count, the physical size of the facility, and the availability of power, among other factors. This means even looking at things as basic in nature as main hallways and individuals' entries to be best determined facility layout. All of these things matter, so by taking them into account, we are able to get you a setup that is specifically designed to your requirements and needs. For example, we consider aspects as basic as the entrances, whether there's going to be one main interior corridor, individual exterior entries, or roll-up doors. Each of those choices has pros and cons. From a security standpoint, if you have one main hallway and the rest of the structure is a brick wall, you don't really have too much to worry about. In contrast, if you have 16 rooms, all of which open to the outside, then those 16 doors all need to be properly secured. That being said, the benefit of doing something like that is that you can consider each space independently from the other, deciding where to put the condensers, where to hang the air handler, and how to run the line sets. In general, the manner in which we consider different setups to determine these layouts is quite efficient and greatly beneficial in reducing installation time. Having determined the type of method, layout, and lighting, we now have a really good idea of what your facility looks like and what we are going to be needing, to then proceed by using a general rule of thumb. Our rule of thumb is that one 5-ton Evolution series cools 15,000 watts of heat load with outdoor temperatures between 80 and 85 Fahrenheit, with R12 insulation or better, which means that you need 1 ton for every 3,000 watts for adequate cooling capacity. This includes burning CO2 to help with plant growth, as it's another heat source, by elevating CO2 levels for a 15 to 30% increase in yield. In order to do that effectively, you need to have a sealed room, because vents do not confine CO2 to the environment. Once the room is sealed, environmental control technology is required, and that's where Excel Air Systems comes in. We are also going to look at the size of plants themselves. Some individuals want to grow large tree-like plants on a 20-week cycle or longer, rather than the average 8-week cycle. Why does that factor in? At that size, plants are going to transpire a lot more, meaning your humidity requirements will be elevated, which is why you've got to know your capacity. Once we have the capacities, we know what systems are needed, so we can lay out exactly where they are going. A big aspect of that plays into airflow design and preliminary ducting, because selecting a general airflow system is simple enough, but without ensuring that it's actually flowing equally and evenly throughout the whole room, the process and outcome are flawed. How are we going to move the air in this space so that we remove the hot and cold spots? How are we going to make sure that it's consistent throughout to prevent stratification? There's a lot to unpack there, and we want to provide you with a full understanding of those concepts, which is why we will be devoting a portion of Part 2 of the Sealed Rooms webinar to explaining airflow designs in depth. After taking all of these factors into account, we confirm that we have the power available to do these things and secure the solutions to these issues. Having established this, we then create a 3D room rendering free as part of the consultation process to provide you with a 360-degree view by turning your dream into a reality and customizing every detail with everything to scale. Excel Air Systems lets you see all your ideas come to life. You can then share the impressive concept imagery and technical write-ups with your investors, partners, and builders to strengthen their understanding and provide reassurance by better illustrating the full potential of your product. After you've selected a site, chosen a method, and provided your information by filling out our online snapshot form, we can properly size the systems to your facility and establish the list of necessary gear. Now, with a clearer understanding of growing methods and what facility designs entail, you can form a solid plan of action. Now, moving on to the next section, we can look at the configuration stage so that you are thoroughly prepared for the fast and efficient installation when you receive your new equipment. At Excel Air Systems, we believe in streamlining this process to make everything as convenient as possible in order to help you implement an effective rollout. A key aspect of this approach is how we utilize redundancy in multiple systems. For example, instead of having you install 4 10-ton systems or even one 40-ton system in your facility, we would split those needs into 8 5-ton systems. Why make this distinction so important? In the untimely event that you experience some sort of partial system failure, the setup allows you to continue progressing with minimum impact until the issue is resolved, as the other systems can be adjusted accordingly. When compared with large system setups, this is by far the most power-efficient selection. For example, if you were running just one large system, but you only need to use 75% of that capacity, you'd be wasting power and resources. In contrast, multiple systems can be staged accordingly, so if you have 4 systems in a room, 3 can run continuously while the 4th can be utilized to switch between air conditioning and dehumidification modes as needed. Then, on days with increased exterior temperatures, the 4th system can be booted in to add the overall facility capacity. This redundancy also makes our systems much easier and faster to install, rather than having to bring in a crane or a factory and load management to install a large rooftop system. You can use much smaller equipment in any room, with a very minimum amount of weight distribution required, thanks to the Evolution Series sleek and compact nature. We've known individuals who have literally used a rope and 2 people on the edge of a building to hoist the units up. More commonly, many installations of our systems, especially of our air handlers, have utilized a simple hand crank drywall lift. This is rather noteworthy because it means you could even install an entire system on your own, which is just not an option with most HVAC systems. If, for example, you want to put in a large number of systems all at once, as opposed to incrementally, you could install them approximately 2 to 4 times faster while eliminating 90% of the potential headaches that come from repeated pressure checking, touch-ups, and running the systems each time to test it. That way, if you have 3 or 4 people working on site, they can be installing a system at the same time, rather than traditionally where there would be 2 people working together on one system for an entire day or 2 and only then moving on to the next. By keeping each room's configuration fairly identical, Excel Air Systems also saves you the considerable time in the process, as each layout is just a replica of a replica. If you're doing an installation and rooms 1 through 10 are all very similar, if not identical, you are able to improve your speed and efficiency every time you effectively repeat the task. Whether you are installing one system or dozens, every subsequent installation will become easier and easier the more frequently you do it. We've also increased security and efficiency by removing the opportunity for any foreign contaminants to enter your facility via the system, as even the smallest amount of entrapped water, lint, or metal would push back, breaking the compressor. We achieve this by test running it beforehand in our facility, bringing it into a vacuum state, and completely voiding it of any air. Since even the most microscopic leaks render in a vacuum state impossible, you can rest assured that air pollutants and leaks will not be a potential issue, as the pressure check system is fully closed off and leak-free. After this process, we charge the system with the exact amount of refrigerant and ship it to you. At Excel Air Systems, we prove our experience by offering the only compact air system capable of simultaneously maintaining your desired temperature, humidity, and air quality levels, coupled with an easily scaled installation process. A big part of this lies within our determination to continually look at ways of refining our innovative products to avoid potential issues and ensure maximum efficiency. When you are installing our systems, making the connection is effortlessly done by hand, as all of the components are compatible with our second generation Quick Connect plug-and-play fittings. With their unique design, you don't have to worry about using any tools, as they each feature a ball bearing that pops into a track after only a few hand turns, signifying that they are connected. Their resealable capabilities also allows you to disconnect and reconnect them in this manner without any loss of refrigerant charge. In the event that an issue arises, you can easily swap components. For more complex installations where copper pipe could prove challenging, our plug-and-play fittings can be integrated with additional add-ons, such as our pre-charged flexible line set. Together, these products stand out among Excel Air Systems' most innovative upgrades as a total game changer, in contrast to traditional components. With the outdoor condenser and the indoor air handler in place, as long as the appropriate pre-planning measures have been taken, you are literally just connecting a hose with Quick Connect fittings. The same thing inside and outside, then flipping the switch. It's really that simple. Having established the efficiency of the installation process, we can now go into details of how the order queue process works. After determining the configuration that you're going to go with and having all the desired components in the order sheet, you can then place the order. Generally, there's an initial deposit required, and then you enter into the order queue, which also ties directly into the building schedule itself. One of the big things that we've also advised our customers to consider when ordering is whether to opt for scheduled waves of shipment or have the entire order released and shipped all at once with expected build times. What do we mean by this? For example, if you need 20 systems, there's a good chance that you're not going to be able to install them all at the same time, especially when setting up a multi-room facility. Receiving this shipment in its entirety before you have the adequate space and resources to properly deal with it could be an impending hindrance that gets in the way. Therefore, although we have no problem sending your order as one large shipment, if that's what you prefer, we strongly recommend that you instead have us ship your order in batch releases of a few systems every week. This will give you more flexibility than simply having 20 systems suddenly show up at your front door all at once, leaving you stressfully wondering where you're going to put them all. As such, we found batch release to be very advantageous for our clients, as this allows you to slowly digest the order, managing the systems by either storing them somewhere at your convenience or having them roll out for installation on an as-needed basis. On our side, it permits for a greater degree of flexibility in meeting our manufacturing and release schedule deadlines. Basically, this option helps both parties get where they need to go with greater ease. That being said, we can of course accelerate or decelerate the duration of the designated time window, depending on your scheduling preference, to best meet your needs. Under normal circumstances at Excel Air Systems, we generally strive to have a 3 to 4 week lead time for system building. However, due to a surge of recently launched projects previously on hold during the initial onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, we are presently busier than ever trying to keep up with increased demands. In closing, we strongly believe in helping you facilitate innovation through the value of our products. Therefore, we remain committed to providing you with essential resources to better educate you on what sealed room technology has to offer. In doing so, we aim to make it not only so much easier for you, but also substantially more profitable, because we know that our sustained success lies firmly grounded in your success. On that note, we are looking forward to part 2 of the Sealed Rooms webinar, where we can focus in depth on helping you create the best possible environment for your plants. In that session, we'll be covering the intricacies of temperature, humidity, and air quality concepts with emphasis on the importance of airflow design, so you won't want to miss it. Right now, though, we want to be super respectful of everyone's time, so we'd like to express our sincere appreciation to all of you for your interest and attention. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share our knowledge with you. It's been great fun. Please feel free to reach out at your convenience and send us an email with any questions that you may have. Or visit www.excelairsystems.com/snapshot to fill out a snapshot form so that we can gain a better understanding of your situation to help you better.